So welcome, Maddie Lasser. Maddie Lasser is a senior content program manager at GitHub. GitHub is a platform for developers to collaborate on, manage, and share code. GitHub offers tools for version control, project management, and software development. Welcome, Maddie.
Thank you, Brandon. So happy to be here.
Let me first start by learning a little bit more about GitHub itself. What
Sure.
kinds of tools and services does GitHub offer? And who are the different kinds of customers you're serving?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, GitHub is sort of the home for developers. It's a platform where developers can collaborate, create repositories. It's a lot about version control. So allows developers to work on the same project at the same time without having a version control issue. As a non-technical person, there are also a lot of ways to use GitHub that are friendly for non-technical folks. There's project board features for project management. There's issues and repositories for tracking projects and collecting information. Um, and I would say the audience for GitHub is really anybody. Right now, we're on this big campaign around everybody can be a developer and everybody is a developer. So even in my role, I am working with developer tools. I am performing in ways that are similar to a developer without really being technical and really having that technical experience. So anybody can use GitHub, get on there, play around. It's really user friendly. It's super fun to use. So it's for everyone.
Tell me about your role as senior content program manager. What are your main responsibilities?
Yeah. So I'm an events professional. As you know, BK, when I was working at customer analytics, I'm focused on event planning. So that's really what brought me to GitHub. I wasn't even super familiar with GitHub as a company before I went there. And so it's been a really cool, eye opening experience to work in this specific arena of tech. My role is within the brand marketing team. So I sit within a greater marketing organization on the events team. And my specific area of focus is on event content. So who's going to be speaking at the event? What's the agenda? What are we going to be talking about? That's sort of like really meat and potatoes part of an event,
Hmm.
and what attendees are coming there to see and experience. So I'm responsible for developing the agenda, onboarding speakers, setting and reinforcing project milestones. I'm working with a ton of stakeholders across the company, both technical and non-technical folks. And then also creating KPIs and strategically thinking about content in a way that we can measure it for our own performance, but also like, is this landing with our audience? Like, do developers care about what we're saying? Do they care about the information that we're providing to them so that we can continuously improve event over event and year over year for developers?
Tell me about some of these events that you're planning. Are they mostly for developers? Is there another audience? What's the content?
Yeah, so primarily developers. The biggest event that I work on is GitHub Universe, which is a couple thousand people in San Francisco every October. It's a user conference, so we have a lot of use cases of using GitHub as the product. And it's supposed to be sort of that like all up culmination point for GitHub users to get together, get excited, learn about what's new, what's coming soon. And that's really the cornerstone event for our events team, and it's our all hands on deck event. Outside of that, I also support our revenue kickoff, which is like our sales kickoff event. And that is just around 1,000 people getting together to kick off the fiscal year in July. And then I also support Galaxy, which is our GitHub Roadshow event. It's an opportunity for conversations with customers around the globe. Obviously, San Francisco is the center of tech in the United States, but we use it as an opportunity to go to both EMEA and APAC and talk to customers one on one, see where they're at in their GitHub experience, and talk with them about ways to further engage them on GitHub.
How many people do you get at that event? And how many days is the event?
So that one is 2 days of critical access content. I'm responsible specifically for our Day Zero event, which is our like early access, NBA only, first look part of the event. Um, but outside of that, it's a couple thousand people who attend. And I want to say we had around like 115 sessions last year. And it's both like sort of that traditional stand and deliver model. We have like keynote speakers from the company, but also customers who speak on the main stage. And then we also do like a sandbox session. So folks can kind of like have a hands-on learning experience at Universe. And then we also do discussion lounges, which are like much more discussion based, an opportunity for customers to talk to one another about their experience with the input of GitHub employees, which we are called hubbers. So fun. So they can like meet with hubbers, talk to hubbers about their experience. And then we also do a lot of demoing. I feel like with GitHub, it's a product that, yeah, it's like you're going to demo it. People want to see it demoed. So that's a big part of that event.
What are the different product teams you work with on your team? Your brand marketing team, you work across these products. I mean, these events obviously include, it sounds like a lot of GitHub's tools and services and demonstrations. Do you work with a lot of the teams?
Yeah, I feel like, even though we're within marketing and it's sort of a silo in itself, we work with pretty much every team at GitHub. When we're developing that content, it's a lot of working with product managers. So really drilling down into like, who is the persona of the person we want to be speaking to? How do we speak to them effectively? What do they want to hear? They're sort of that filter for us, and they're more on the front lines of understanding what the customer's looking for, what developers want to hear. But I also work with like developer relations, analyst relations, partnership teams, as well as like customer marketing teams. So in the development phase, it's a lot of that sort of like thought leadership partners within the company. But then when it comes to actually executing the event, we work with workplace security, we work with our facility teams, we work with the office of the COO. So we're really touching every team and having an experience collaborating with pretty much everybody at GitHub. I haven't yet found a team that I haven't collaborated with. Maybe engineers do sort of sit in their silo and just, do their work. But I've definitely worked with teams that are tangential to that.
Yeah, they're doing their engineering thing.
They're just like coding away, which I'm like, you do.
Yeah, they're in the zone.
Exactly.
I remember the zone. So what does a typical day look like for you at GitHub? First of all, are you on site? Are you remote? Are you hybrid?
Yes. So GitHub is a remote first company. So our whole company is remote,
Mhm.
which is awesome. That's really like what I was looking for in my next role, which is one of the big reasons that I was drawn to GitHub as a company. My typical day is, I would say, a lot of like context switching. I have to go between a variety of different events that I'm managing or preparing for. So like I said, like Galaxy and our sales kickoff right now are like heavy in the planning stages. But also Universe is going to kick up really soon too. So
Yep.
it's going between a lot of different priorities and a lot of different contexts for all of my different meetings. A big part of my job is definitely chasing milestones. I sort of set the milestones, which is great because then I know where I have wiggle room to be able
Right.
to like enforce or lean back. But it's a lot of chasing milestones. I would say my favorite things that I get to do associated with my job that maybe aren't every single day, but frequent enough. One is getting to communicate with speakers. So speakers are a big part of my role, onboarding them, communicating with them throughout the process, making sure that speakers feel prepared for their speaking engagement. A lot of times, I would say 9 times out of 10, these speakers aren't doing this as their full-time job. So they've got other priorities, they've got other things going on. And I'm sort of that, gnat in the background, fly in a room being like, PS, your slides are due soon. Like, have you thought about it? Have you downloaded the deck yet?
Right.
So I'm there to kind of play that role. But I love working with speakers. Like that is a big thing that drew me to content in general, because I'm a people person. Like I love to make connections. I love to meet new people. I love to help the speakers through that onboarding process and communicate with them and being like, what do you need? Could this be better? Like, can I give you more resources? Do you need assistance? We do like speaker coaching is a big thing that we'll do, which is super helpful. Shout out to Montana Von Fliss, who's our speaker coach. But it's like a huge perk to be able to have a coach who will sit down with you and be like, what's your narrative? How are you delivering your message? And so I like to think that speakers who work with us not only get well prepared to speak at our event, but it's a professional development opportunity for them too to learn how to speak at a large scale event and get some of those training skills.
I see. So let's talk about your career journey. You've worked in
Mhm.
various industries, experiential marketing, education, art. What inspired you to pursue event management and content strategy? Basically, how did you get here?
Yeah. So I, out of college, had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like, I will take whatever job I can get out of college. I just need like a full-time job grown up.
Yeah.
So when I first graduated college, I worked at the Friends School of Baltimore. And I was just sort of like a admin assistant. I was the registrar, so I processed grades for the upper school, which was thrilling. But a big part of my job was um, organizing and planning the 12th grade graduation.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, like light bulb moment. This is what I want to do. I had done event planning in college. I didn't realize that it was a job that I could do full time. I always thought it was just sort of like a part of other job. So I realized that that was like, yes, this is right for me. This is my path forward. And that's when I moved to Philly. So once I moved to Philly, I started pursuing doing event planning full time. I worked at Terrain out in Glen Mills and Delco, doing day of event coordinating for like weddings, baby showers, bridal showers, a lot of F&B management, where I learned a lot about like working in kitchens, working with chefs, doing that sort of like day of coordination. But I realized that I didn't love working every night and every weekend. It did get a little old for me personally pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So from that, I pivoted to moving over to the art museum. And all of these like sort of steps in my path weren't necessarily like, yeah, great. No, I like definitely want to work in art. Like I'm here for the art. I was always just sort of like seeking out the event planning piece of all of these jobs. Like I was like, where are there jobs and events? Where can I learn about event planning on a large scale? And when I went to the art museum, that's exactly what I learned. It's a huge space. We would do like the Penn Freshman event every year we would do. And that's like, I want to say like 3,000 kids. Like it's a huge amount of people in that space and it's
Mhm.
high security. So I learned a lot about like fire marshal and egress and like how many bartenders you need at a bar so your bar doesn't go down. So all of those things really kept me interested in event planning and wanting to learn more about it, and led me to all these different industries. When I came to Wharton, when I was working at Wharton Customer Analytics, I was owning my own portfolio of events. So that was like my first time really owning a portfolio. We did experiential programming for students, our datathons, our semester long projects.
Mhm.
We hosted the Women in Data Science conference. So every step sort of in my career has led me a little bit deeper into like further down the path of learning like what is event? Is all this like about like is there am I a generalist? Am I
Right.
more focused? And so doing event content kind of fell into my lap. I was looking for a new role when I was leaving Penn, and I found a job as a contractor with Atlassian, which is another tech company, project management based tech company. And the role was in content. And I, at Penn had worked with speakers all the time doing WIDs and we would always do these sort of like industry panels and fireside chats for students, working with customers, working with folks who work in industry. And so I knew I liked working with speakers. So I was like, okay, cool. Instead of doing food and beverage and marketing and speakers and registration, I'll focus. Like that sounds like a good area of
Yeah.
focus for me. And so that's what really got me into event content, and I've loved it ever since. I think it works well with my skill set, but also it's just fun. Is a fun piece of event planning, and there's all different sort of silos that you can go into within the overall events industry.
On your LinkedIn, you have a CMP next to your name. What is a CMP? What does it mean? And how does one become a CMP?
Yeah, for sure. So, love having letters by my name. I feel like it feels like really like unprofessional. CMP is a certified meeting professional, and it's something that I pursued when I was still working at Wharton. Something that Wharton helped me
Oh,
go after and supported me in the process of pursuing. Um, so I got my CMP in 2021. It's basically a test. It's like a certification test, very similar to like a PMP or other professional certification. And you study for the test, you apply, you need 36 hours of either like experience working as an event professional or like continuing education credits to be able to apply. And once you apply, you can schedule your time to take the exam. I did a like study course with a local event planning chapter called MPI, Meeting Planners International. And it was like a group of us who got together Saturday mornings, virtually and in person, to be able to study together and learn the book of what the test was going to be about.
mhm.
I think it's sort of a mix of like, you could take it if you have worked as an event planner for a long time, but it's really a book test, in my opinion. But the value that I really found in it, especially having worked across a ton of different industries and in a ton of different roles where I was doing sort of event generalist things,
Yeah.
it really helped me fill the gaps. Like there's a whole section on trade shows and like what booth shapes are and how big booths should be. And I had like a lot of gaps in my knowledge when it came to that kind of event planning. And so doing that test really helped me sort of mature as an event planner and have that kind of support and experience and background without having personally experienced it. My favorite part of that test is that they warned us that we would have to know how to calculate how much coffee to have per people. And it wasn't on my test. I didn't have to do it, but
Ah,
I was prepared. I don't know if I'm prepared anymore. But to figure out, okay, if you have a meeting in the morning, like how much coffee should you have? How much tea should you have per person who's going to be there? Decaf, regular. It's a whole equation.
so is CMP basically learning how to plan different kinds of events and what's involved?
Yeah, and it's really focused on like sort of the different types of event planning. There's a marketing section, there's a project management section, there's a trade show section. So it's like all sort of the branches that come off of being an event planner and planning an event. Uh, and so I think it's more of like a general knowledge of event as an industry. It definitely pops into like tourism and CDBs, which are like tourism bureaus, that kind of stuff. And so it's just sort of like a really wide snapshot at what it is to be an event planner, which I think that's a great place for people to start too, if people are curious about like, what is it to be an event planner?
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to do this kind of work? What does a day look like as an event planner? They sell textbooks, like I have a full textbook for it. They have like workbooks and tests and practice tests that I think is a really good place to just get familiar with like, oh, I didn't know that was considered event planning. Like, is this a part of event planning? It answers a lot of those questions.
Great. Can you share an example of a recent project you managed, event, that you're particularly proud of? And maybe it's one of the big three events that you've already mentioned, or a particular aspect of those events.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I'm just coming on from doing Universe this year. It was the 29th and 30th of October of 2024. And I am particularly proud of being a part of that event in general.
Mhm.
I posted on my LinkedIn, they did sort of like a documentary, like a 7 days out kind of deal with our GitHub Films team. Which I think shows really well just sort of what it looks like leading up to an event. I went to San Francisco a week ahead of the event to support our COO's keynote prep. And so that is just like, long hours of sitting in a room with the COO who's practicing his presentation, and this demo failed. Okay. So like, what are we going to do in place of that demo? We had a really fun element of his keynote since it was so close to Halloween. I don't know if you've seen those like giant tentacles that people put on their house for Halloween to like blow up one.
Yeah, in my
So
neighborhood.
we had those yeah, exactly, exactly. So we had those incorporated into his keynote, which was super fun. We used Home Assistant to be able to demonstrate how you can program different automations for your home. Um, and that was, I mean, a really fun process as an event planner to sort of think through how we were going to make that exciting, how we were going to make it really like wow moment for the audience, and everybody who was in attendance of the keynote. Because at first it was like, put a lamp on stage and turn the lamp on and make the light bulb blue. And everybody was like, yeah, I guess we could do that, but I don't know, isn't that kind of lame? And so we were just like using that as an opportunity to like spitball and, okay, well, like, what if we did like, a desk setup and we had Mona is our mascot. She's an Optocat. And everybody has these sort of like LED lights that they have in their offices. And ultimately ended up with, let's use Home Assistant to start the tentacles. Let's have them inflate. Let's have them be behind the stage. And so I think Universe All Up is definitely the thing that I'm most proud of working on.
So that logo on the GitHub website, that's Mona?
Yes, her name is Mona.
Okay.
She was created by the original founder's daughter.
Oh.
And she part octopus, part cat. She's an octo cat.
Wow. Okay. Had no idea.
It's one of those like little lore things, you find out.
That's why I'm doing these interviews. I'm learning so much. Tell me about some specific tools you use in your role to create content, manage projects, plan events. And I'm assuming these are GitHub tools, but maybe not strictly GitHub tools.
Yeah, definitely not strictly GitHub tools. We're, trying to use more of our own products as much as we possibly can. So, like I mentioned before, we'll use issues and repos to be able to sort of organize projects. So I guess you would say, like, we'll have like a main repo for GitHub Universe, for example, and then we'll have sub issues, issues that kind of branch off of that for content or customer meetings or analyst meetings. Like, we'll try and use a repo as just sort of our like main hub for the event and then kind of derive off of that. Recently, we've been really getting into using GitHub project boards, which is sort of that like Kanban style, like columns where you can drag different tasks into different columns across the board, which I think is amazing. It's a tool that I've seen at other companies that I've worked at, like at Atlassian. Jira is a very similar model to that. But the thing that's cool about GitHub project boards is that you can link repositories so that you can organize issues on a single board. So you're not doubling your work, you're linking out to work that already exists. And it's just a different way of viewing it and visualizing it, which for me, I'm a super visual person, like having that drag and drop. If I can see a column of like not done, or this is my sprint for this week, that's super helpful. So on the GitHub side, that's really the main things that we use. Like, I'm not diving in and using Copilot, not yet at least,
Right.
Maybe in the future. But the other things that we use, we're a Microsoft subsidiary, so we use a lot of like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneDrive, anything that we can sort of collaborate on to be able to work together. I think being in a remote first environment is not a challenge in a bad way, but a challenge in sort of a fun way of like, how do we work best all together? How do we keep version control? How are we not like all kind of working in our own silos since we're not physically together in an office? And so we'll use the Microsoft Suite, but also the Google Suite to be able to collaborate. My like new favorite thing about Google Docs is that you can have tabs. I don't know if you've explored this yet, but I think it came out like probably like 6 months ago.
Oh, no.
You can have like different tabs within the same Google Doc so that you can say like, this Google Doc is for like all one project, but within it, I'm going to have tabs and subtabs to be able to organize. You can add emojis. I'm like big on tons of color, tons of emojis. Um, and so that's been sort of my new obsession when it comes to technology and project management. My team is working on something that we're calling like an event content toolkit. So essentially, we have like a single source of truth for each event for content. Everything lives within it, whether it's like titles and abstracts for sessions, speaker tracking. We'll do a lot of like scripting, teleprompter scripting that can all live within the same document, production schedules. Big thing that I'll do in my role is run of show. I'll work with the actual like on the ground production team to do show timing. So it's a little bit more on the
Okay.
like production side of the house. So like when's our host coming out? What are they going to say? How long are they going to be out there for? Some of our like senior leaders love teleprompters, like what's the teleprompter going to say? How's it going to run? That kind of stuff. So Google Docs is amazing for that. And then the other big one that I use that I'm a big fan of is Slack Block Kit Builder. So it integrates with Slack. It's a part of Slack's API. It's a website that you can go to, and it basically makes your Slack messages prettier, for lack of a better word, more clickable, more readable. And so I'll use that for pretty much all of my speaker communications. I think getting people to try and read is one of the biggest challenges of my job. How do I convince people to read what I consider to be something that's very important and critical, but they're getting hundreds of messages a day, block text, like they don't want to read another message. And
Yeah.
here I am coming in with like, you got to do this, or like, you didn't do this, you're in trouble. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to make my messages more interesting to read and easier to read. Whether that be like, a big thing we'll do is a speaker know before you go deck. So like a week out from the event, speakers, everything that you need to know all in one place. Here you go, little gift. Still have trouble getting people to read something like that. So what we'll do is like, I'll have a recorded version where it's a video of me speaking about the deck, or the deck itself linked as a PDF, and just like two little clickable buttons. Want to watch it? Click it. Want to read it? Click it. Which I think helps a ton.
Okay. And it also helps with the content itself. You say it makes Slack messages prettier. Does it help actually write the content?
Not the actual content, but it is drag and drop when it comes to like sort of the modality of it. Like if you want to have a big picture, just drag and drop the picture, drag and drop like a rich text editor, drag and drop some buttons. It has like just the tiniest sprinkle of HTML, which I can do without really knowing anything.
Yeah.
But it's pretty user friendly, and it just makes it sort of just elevates the look. Like you can do headings, like I said, button. A big thing I'll do too is just like having like sort of smaller form GIFs. And I'll do like at the very end of my message, I'll link out to like a YouTube video or like a funny TikTok to entice people as a gift. But it doesn't get bogged down by sort of that just like plain text of Slack.
Slack Block Kit Builder.
Yeah.
Got it. Super interesting. Tell me about a time you had to resolve a major challenge while managing an event or project, if you can talk about it, and how you resolved it.
Yeah. When I was thinking about this one, BK, I was thinking back to when I was at my previous role at Atlassian, because I think, this is also like a big interview question that I always prepare when I'm looking at a new position. Like, what's something that I had to sort of like manage through?
Yeah.
And so when I was thinking about this, when I was at Atlassian, there was a moment at one of our developer events, like 2 weeks before the event, a week before the event, where our agenda just totally changed, right? Huge change, different priorities from like higher ups. We need to completely change what we're doing with the agenda. And I think that that sort of change, that sort of like abrupt directional difference can be like really discouraging, right? We've spent months building an agenda, sourcing speakers, preparing content. It's like a lot of work to have that totally shift so close to the event. I think for me felt, okay, like this is maybe a little disheartening. This is maybe a little scary. Like, what are we going to do? Um, but I think that the most important mindset you can have as an event planner is to, one, assume positive intent. Like, this is the reason for this change is likely to make this content, make this event better for the attendees. And so instead of having like a negative mindset of like, but all of my work, all of the things we planned, what will happen to them?
Right.
Taking it as an opportunity to flip that on its head and say, okay, problem solving mode. This is a good thing. How do we get this ready in a week? And I think that that sort of like adaptability and ability to be flexible around what is going to happen in an event. Events are like very fast paced. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stakeholders often that are working on an event. So being able to parse out like what's the important thing to focus on and how much attention do I need to give it, I think is really important as an event planner, as well as just staying organized. So in these moments, you can kind of quickly pivot and say, okay, who's coming up on stage instead? No problem. Just
Right.
you just need a body on stage. Who's it going to be? Fabulous. Love it. Here's all your materials. Um, Compressed timelines are a big thing in event planning too. Like if I had my perfect world, everything would be done months ahead of the event, but that's just not realistic. And you often can't get people who have competing priorities to care about the event until it's, really staring them down. So I think that having that experience of having something go so wrong from a content perspective, so close to the event, sort of like has made me less scared of that happening. Okay, you want to change a session? Like, you are the subject matter expert. I am just here to facilitate you getting on stage and getting your message out to our attendees.
Sounds like very agile project management skills.
Definitely.
So it sounds like event planning can be pretty stressful. How do you manage work-life balance?
Yes. So my big number one thing with work-life balance is just setting really clear and firm boundaries. Um, I work from home, I work from my house, but I work from 9 to 5. Like, that is my window of work. That is the time that I'm going to dedicate my attention and my energy to working on my GitHub projects. It has to be super firm for me because I think outside of that, that's sort of like the amorphous zone of burnout. Like, if I'm overextending myself, if I'm going outside of that boundary, then the next day, how am I going to sit down and work from 9 to 5? I've already worked a little bit more the night before. And, I've sort of had that in other jobs before. I think event planning can sort of stretch what your perception of those boundaries should be, especially because a lot of event planning work is nights and weekends, like not a traditional 9 to 5 work schedule. So you have to sort of identify for yourself, like, okay, when is my Saturday? When is my Sunday? Like, when am I going to take time off just to rest and recoup?
Right.
But what I found from setting those boundaries is that I still have like a lot of energy to be wanting to do things. Um, However, I think that like a traditional corporate work environment, while exciting and engaging and something that I enjoy, it's not as restorative as other sort of practices in my life.
Yeah.
And so in that time when I'm not working, I try really hard to do creative projects, work on things that sort of fill up my cup. I, outside of working at GitHub, have a art business where I will like make and sell art in Philadelphia, either to Philadelphia businesses or at Philadelphia events. And so a lot of that time I used to work on my art, whether it's like drawing things or like thinking about my business, planning for my business, making the actual products, packaging, shipping, that kind of stuff, which ends up filling up my cup while
Yeah.
using up sort of that excess energy so that I can come into, 9 a.m. on a Friday and be like, cool, I'm supercharged. I'm really excited to get to all the GitHub things since I've sort of taken care of the rest of it.
So interesting. You sound incredibly balanced.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I know for myself, you mentioned clear boundaries. I know for myself, I've had issues with work boundaries in the past and occasionally still do. So we'll find myself working well past 5 o'clock or before 9 a.m. in the morning. For me, it's a ongoing struggle and process of managing those boundaries.
Do you have anything, BK? Because I feel like I see you as a very like balanced and sort of like, you know, stress-free kind of person is my perception. Do you have any like tips or tricks for keeping that balance?
I have a lot of things that I do. So it's almost like it's just like there's just too many options. I like work, but I play music. I actually have instruments in every room in my house. So
Oh, I love that.
at any point, and I do this often between meetings, um, right before a meeting, I will play bass or guitar, and actually throughout the day, I'll do that. Again, every room except maybe our kitchen has an instrument that's ready to be picked up and played. So I find that if it's out and it's ready, I'll play it all the time. So I play every day.
I love that. You're gonna have to get some like spoons or castanets or something for your kitchen, something you can
I
easily
know.
do while you cook.
So I definitely don't cook. That's not something on my list.
Me
But
too.
I
Me
can
too.
bang on pots and pans. So that's fun.
That's perfect. See?
And my kids enjoy that. I also, I try to work out. That's sort of a newish thing for me. Um, Again, it's a struggle. It's finding the time, and it's not even that much time, honestly. You just need a little bit of time, every day or every other day. So there's it's a lot of little things, honestly. There's no one solution to managing life, work-life balance. Plus, I have kids. So kids actually force me out of everything, out of work, mostly out of work mode. So that actually provides a lot of balance. It's like built-in balance.
That's a great point because I do sort of feel like it's a headspace thing. Like for me, the way I need to recoup my energy is by making things or like doing creative things, like using my brain, sort of the other side of my brain.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's so true. Like I also working out for me is like such a mind refresher. And to
Yeah.
your point, it's like not even that long. Like often it's the first thing to go for me where it's like, I
Mhm.
have time for that. How could I possibly have time for that?
I know.
But it's such a reset. It's like a mind clearer, which I think those things are so important for you to just be able to, it's almost like context switching in your own life. Like I have my work stuff, I have my personal stuff, I have music stuff, I have
Yeah.
kids or family stuff. And it's like, how do you context switch between it all? I feel like you just need those like palette cleansers to sort of like reset you and get different parts of your cup refilled.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. Definitely hard for me. Plus, I teach. Plus, I'm trying to
Yeah.
I'm trying to launch this podcast. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
Any particular future goals or projects at GitHub that you're particularly excited about and can share with us?
Yeah, I think, for us at GitHub right now, we're very Copilot focused, which I think is really fun and exciting. We're
Okay.
all sort of in the age of AI right now. And I think that Copilot as a tool, I think is really exciting, especially for me as a non-technical person, like the fact that we're moving closer to this sort of like native language use of tools for coding and I think is fun. Like the idea that I could like
Right.
work on a coding project and be able to use Copilot to be like, how do I do this? And Copilot's like, oh, here you go. Here's the code. Like that removes so many barriers for me as a non-technical person. And so I think that that's something that gets me really excited being on the GitHub side to know that our products aren't only for sort of like maybe what you would consider like a really rigid idea of what a developer is, um, which I think to the point about like creativity and different ways of thinking, like it just opens so many other doors and possibilities for people who don't have that sort of traditional background,
Right.
or that technical experience or that knowledge to be able to play in the same sandbox, as it were, with people who maybe have that deeper knowledge. Like I feel like it's such a small example, but in my life, I'm always like, oh my God, that would be an amazing app. But then I'm like, I don't know how to build an app. Like, where would I even, I got to know a guy and that's what I'm giving him 10%, you know? I can't do that.
We
So
know a lot of
I
guys
think
now. I mean,
these
you work
sort
at
of,
GitHub. You work at GitHub.
right, right. Just wait, my app is launching soon.
Okay.
But I think like removing those barriers is really important for people's creativity and sort of this like boundless idea generating machine. Is that, giving people the tools to be able to do it with less barriers to entry is super important. So I'm glad that that's such a priority for GitHub, and it comes through in our events in a lot of ways. Like we're really expanding who we're talking to. A big thing within GitHub, but also like other places that I've worked for events is identifying personas. So like, who are we speaking to? I think just generally a big marketing thing. Who are we speaking to and how are we speaking to them? And this idea of a new kind of sort of builder persona of like, I'm the person who's going to be in the driver's seat, doing that initial build. But we're not only talking to developers in a traditional sense anymore, we're talking to students, we're talking to project managers, we're talking to designers, about how to kind of enter that build phase and what their pain points are, what they want to know more about, how we can help them and support them
Right.
through our products. And so I think that piece is really cool and interesting, and I think is sort of the future direction of what we mean when we talk about software.
Off topic. What do you think of AI for art?
AI for art feels really tricky. I think that there's a lot of use cases where I think it's a good thing. I think that it helps people do their job as artists
Right.
or helps people do their job in other areas where maybe they would need to pay for an artist to create something for them, but they can't afford it. Like I think it breaks down a lot of those barriers for folks who would not be able to get access to something because it's prohibitively expensive. But on the other side of it, real artist art is being used to train AI. So I think that that comes down to a little bit of like an intellectual property protection standpoint.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that AI art will replace the need for artists.
Okay.
I think that it'll just create a new category of art. Um, but I think, ever since working at customer analytics and AI for business, people have this sort of inherent fear when it comes to AI. Like there's definitely groups of people who seem afraid of it. And I am personally trying to lean in the other direction. I think that it's a helpful tool. It's a tool like anything else, right? Like had we, gotten Microsoft Word or spell check and been like, what? Like nobody's gonna know how to spell
Right.
anymore. Like this
Yeah.
is
Right.
terrible.
That's true.
Like,
That's
okay,
actually
sure,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like I'm not a great speller. Like, don't ask me to spell anything, but I do think that it helps me do the things that I'm good at better. And I don't have to spend my time spinning my wheels over like, God, is that the right theirs? Like I can just focus on how am I supporting my speaker? What are they saying? What is their narrative? So
Right.
I think in that way, it sort of alleviates pain points for people.
What is GitHub working on that's new? Any new tools that are going to be released? Can you talk about those things that were they talk about at the San Francisco event?
Yeah, so our big release that we just had in December is like mid-December, so still feels pretty new. Is that GitHub Copilot is now available for everyone in VS Code.
Oh, yeah.
Ask me more about that. I couldn't tell you. All I
Yeah.
know is that it's accessible. People can get it for free through using VS Code, which I think that's a big push for GitHub is just Copilot accessibility. Like it is such a great tool,
Yeah.
and we want as many people to be able to use it and experience it and benefit from it as possible. And so generally, like Copilot is so much of our focus right now. So I'd say anything new that's going to come in the future is probably around Copilot.
What kind of advice would you give to someone aspiring to a career in event management or content programming? And maybe you could talk a little bit more about CMP as well and some resources for that certification.
Yeah. So I think my advice to people who are looking into event management is to just go for it. Like jump in. You've been to events in your life. Like most people have been to some sort of large scale event by the time they're graduating college. If you've enjoyed it, if you wanted to know what it's like behind the scenes, if you want to be a part of that action, I say do it, go for it, try it out. Like you're not going to know if you like it until you try it. Um, to that point about the CMP, I think it's a really great resource if you're looking for more information about what event planning really is. The point that I made earlier, when I started my career, I thought event planning was just something that somebody maybe did a little bit of in their job,
Right.
not that it was a job all on its own. And so I think the CMP is like a huge window into what is an event planner? How can I be an event planner? What areas of event planning can I do? Um, there's a huge section in the CMP around like food and beverage. And even though that's not something that I do now in the content world, it's a huge part of event planning. And so it can really kind of give you support around like finding an area of interest to you. And I think that's sort of the second piece of my advice since kind of falling into content. Um, do something that you feel like your skills really flourish. And for me, I'm like super type A. I love to be organized. I'm a people person. So event content is really that right silo for me. But there's so many different areas of event planning and so many different kinds of thinkers and skill sets that are needed to be successful in event planning. So definitely make sure you're doing something that you feel like my skills are, I'm loving it. Like for me, putting together a spreadsheet and writing out these messages to speakers and working on a script is like so fun. But to somebody else, that might be their nightmare. So just make sure you are doing something where you feel like your skills are being flexed right for you.
Great. I had one follow-up question, but I think you sort of answered this. Any specific skills or tools that you think are essential? Anything else? Any resources you can point to?
One would be like for mentorship or any sort of like support when it comes to event planning or looking to be an event planner. Meeting Planners International, who I worked with when I was studying for my CNP, is a great resource. It's a national organization, international organization, but within the US, there's chapters for each city. And so I work specifically with the Philadelphia chapter. There's likely a chapter in the city uh, that anybody is in that they can look to for mentorship, additional resources, as well as networking events. Like I think that going to networking events is a great way to meet other people in your industry and be able to learn more about a career in event planning. The other piece would definitely be when it comes to tools. One thing I didn't touch on is there's a lot of event technology tools. Like in my day to day, when I'm doing project management, I'm using Google, I'm using Microsoft. But when it comes to specifically like spinning up a registration page or working on a call for speakers or a call for sessions, there's a lot of tools out there that can be helpful through that process. Three of them that I've worked with before that I've found to be particularly good. One is Rainfocus. Rainfocus is a platform where you can build event registration. You can also manage call for sessions and call for speakers. It can be like a speaker portal. It's like a lot of different tools that can benefit an event planning process. The other one is Swoogo, very similar to Rainfocus. when it comes to building a registration page, but it's a little bit different in this, I would say like a little bit more web focused than it is a little bit more like back end support focused. And then the third is Session Board. And Session Board is a tool that I used when I was at Atlassian. It's another really great content management tool specifically. It's got a lot of like drag and drop features for organizing session. A big like headache when it comes to being an event content professional is working on an agenda and trying to get a good mix of session, same time with no speakers who have conflicts. And no topics that have conflicts. So it's kind of like a festival schedule. Like you don't want Weezer and Joni Mitchell happening at the same time because like, oh my God, who am I gonna pick? So that kind of tool really helps with figuring out those sort of, you know who you would pick?
That is a tough one. I think I'm gonna go with Joni Mitchell. Because I feel like Weezer.
I think I'd be at the Weezer stage. I'd be totally at the Weezer stage.
Yeah. Okay.
100%. But then Joni Mitchell icon, and also like, when else are you going to see Joni Mitchell? So
that's what I'm saying. I think Weezer's going to be around a little longer.
Yeah, and the point being, you can't give people that sort of dilemma. Like, to put people in that spot. Let them see Weezer and let them see Joni Mitchell.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a separate podcast, anyways. This was great. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, BK. This was awesome.
All right.
Thanks again, BK. Have a good Saturday.
You too.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.